morning, my friends, and welcome to another incredible installment. From very high above, all the impudent and vexatious forms of Wyoming mainstream media, this is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Saturday. I have a great program planned for you today. It's an interview with former Chief Justice of the Wyoming Supreme Court, Kate Fox. As you can probably already surmise, members of the bench don't give that many interviews. And I think while they're actually judges, that's probably a good thing. But when they retire, I see no reason why they shouldn't talk to the media. Of course, I'm in the media, so of course I think that. But typically, former justices don't do a lot of interviews. And so I was extraordinarily grateful that Justice Fox, or former Justice Fox, agreed to sit down with me. As you'll figure out pretty quickly in the interview, to make this happen, we had to keep my list of questions pretty constrained because there are a number of cases that Justice Fox is still involved in. I really wanted to ask her about the abortion lawsuits, but that one, yeah, it was clearly outside of the strike zone. But anyway, it's a good interview, and it's with someone that you don't get to hear all that much from. My feeling is that in the future, after a little bit of time has passed, we'll be able to have more discussions with the former Chief Justice. One item in particular that I really wished we could have had a conversation about is whether or not we should have an elected attorney general. Ideally, you'd want an attorney general that doesn't even pay any attention to politics whatsoever and just does their job. For the last 5 years, we haven't had that. There's a lot of people that would make the argument that you can't remove politics from that position. To that I say,
horse crap.
You just have to have somebody that's committed to it. Enforce the law without favoritism, period. If we look at the performance of the former Attorney General, now Supreme Court Justice, it's pretty easy to make the argument that that office was entirely politicized. It was Cowboy State Politics that broke the story that all of the election complaints that had been forwarded to the Wyoming Attorney General's office by Secretary of State Chuck Gray had gone, not to mince words, ignored. And what about Cyrus Western and Bill Novotny, who committed several violations of Wyoming's election code and that the Sheridan County Sheriff's Department had them dead to rights on? That, too, sat on Bridget Hill's desk. So don't tell me for a second that that office is not politicized. And I think it was intentional coming from Governor Gordon's office. But on the other hand, having an attorney general that's elected poses its own political problems. When you intentionally inject politics into something that is not supposed to be political, and we kind of talk about this during the interview in reference to judges, but I think when you inject politics into it, you create the problems of gigantic sums of money going into the attorney general's race. However, it does have the benefit of the people being able to choose the right person. But there again, you're creating a situation where somebody has to get reelected. So there are pluses and minuses on both sides, but I tend to lean in the direction of allowing the people to choose, however detrimental that might be to an office that's already been politicized. But when I asked the former Chief Justice that question, it was just a bit outside. And you can definitely tell by her response. In any case, enough of that. Let's get to the interview. Like I said, this was recorded during my live show yesterday. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics, live on YouTube, Facebook, X, and on Rumble. Doing what I was born to do each and every day. I'm getting to talk to people that, if you didn't have this program, you wouldn't ever be able to talk to them. I'm very excited to talk to former Chief Justice of the Wyoming Supreme Court, Kate Fox. Justice Fox, welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to the program.
Well,
I look forward to it.
Yeah, I'm excited that we could visit. First thing I always do on the show is have my guests just tell my audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, I turned 70 on May 28th, so I'm no longer a justice of the Wyoming Supreme Court. Instead, I'm a grandma and a traveler and a gardener. But I had a long career in the law and on the court. And I should say, when I talk to you today, it's not on behalf of the judicial branch, since I'm a free agent now. It's just Kate Fox with her opinions, and I do have some.
Well, I would imagine that you do. So you were appointed by Governor Meade, is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Uh,
And well, he appointed me late 2013. I started on the Supreme Court in January of 2014.
okay. I guess to get our conversation going, could you just explain to my audience what that selection process was like, what you have to go through, how that whole thing works, and then maybe we'll talk about some questions about it.
Sure. Yes. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about how we choose judges in Wyoming, because I think, of course, it's really important. And I think there's a lot of confusion about how that's done. And perhaps that's because there's been so much noise about the federal judiciary. They're different. As Wyoming, as you know, and the Wyoming people know it, in Wyoming, we have our own way of doing things, and that's true for the Wyoming judiciary too. So how it's done in Wyoming, and has been since the constitutional amendment in 1971, is by merit selection. Whenever there's an opening in either circuit, district, or the Supreme Court, so the whole state judicial branch is the same, that opening is announced. The Judicial Nominating Commission takes applications from lawyers. You have to be a lawyer to be a judge. And they consider those applications and a bunch of other materials like writing samples and references, the kinds of things you would expect that are submitted. So the Judicial Nominating Commission is made up of 3 lawyers who are elected by Wyoming State Bar members, 3 non-lawyers chosen by the governor, and the chair is the Chief Justice, who doesn't vote except in the case of a tie. When I applied, the chair was Chief Justice Kite, who was the first woman on the court. So then they go through that stuff. They interview the best candidates. It's a kind of a typical hiring process, really. And then they send 3 names to the governor. The great thing about the Wyoming system, too, is that all this has to happen in 90 days. So we don't fool around with any, political process, election, or approval, because we get people to work. Right? And sometimes I compare it to a baseball team, right? If your shortstop is going to retire, you get a new one. You don't want to keep playing with a shortstop down. We need to keep delivering justice for the people of Wyoming. So in our system, we almost always have the new judge in place like the day after the old judge retires. And so they keep on deciding cases, which is what they're supposed to be doing. Anyway, so this happens pretty fast, but a lot of work goes into it. And, in my time as chair of the Judicial Nominating Commission, I've been so impressed with how hard the members work and how committed they are to doing this job well. We get judges who just work hard to get the job done. They're almost always from the communities where they're going to serve, so they have a pretty good understanding of what those values are in each community. Most of them are probably born in Wyoming. Certainly, I think every member of the Wyoming Supreme Court and most members of the bench across district and circuit court went to University of Wyoming Law School. So yeah, and what the commission is looking for is what you would hope to have in your judges. So we're talking intelligence, integrity, ethics, the ability to communicate, experience in education, of course, and then also the desire to continue learning, because in the law, you're always learning new things. So they're looking for that stuff, and they're not asking about politics. They're asking about merit and the ability to do the job as best as can be done. The governor makes his pick. Like I said, he has 30 days. And during that 30-day period, It's my understanding the governors get a lot of feedback from the public about whoever's on the short list. And so there is an aspect of a political process and definitely an opportunity for people to express their opinions about the candidates. And then the other opportunity for the people of Wyoming is in the retention elections. So a lot of people don't understand and ask me, hey, why was your name on the ballot? Well, it's because you can kick me out if you don't like me. And it's not a competitive election like, say, a legislative process. It's should we keep Fox or not? And the voters vote up and down. They do have information to form that opinion of whether to keep or not. So there are a couple things. One is a judicial poll that the Wyoming Bar conducts. It's where the lawyers who appear in front of those judges rate them on these objective standards of how they're doing the job. And that information is made public on the bar website and the judicial branch website. It's also sent out to the press prior to the retention elections. So the way it works is if we're talking about a district or a circuit court judge, and you're in Buffalo.
We live in Sheridan now.
Okay. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. It's all the 4th Judicial District. Your press would get the information on those judges because you only vote on your judges. And you vote on the Supreme Court judges because those are statewide. So there's that information. And there's also something really important to remember. Courts are open under the Constitution. Wyoming courts are open. You can go to court, and I wish people would more. Just go see what the judges do because it's pretty impressive, the work that they do. See how they conduct themselves on the bench, see what goes on. You can look at files, go to the clerk's office and look at court files. A lot of it is available online. And most of the decisions, all the decisions that we make, or I keep saying we, I should say they. It's a little hard to have it to break.
It hasn't been that long.
Yeah, right. The Supreme Court decisions are all available online, and they're written very thorough analysis. You can see how the authors and how the court does on that. Most of the district court decisions are also written and available for people to review. So it's a very open process. If people want to know what their judges are doing, they can find out.
Well, I think that, if you ask me, like court, it fits into the same category as a lot of other public meetings, county commissioners, city council, the legislature. I wish more people would take the time to just go watch. I've told a lot of people that all you have to do is go spend a couple of hours in the Capitol building and you will have a whole different perspective of what your elected people do. Now, I do have a couple of questions about the process. And I know that you said that we try to keep politics out of it, and certainly we want judges to be apolitical. But I guess my first question is the makeup of the Judicial Nominating Commission. You mentioned that there are some folks from the Bar Association, and then there are some other community members on there. So my question is, a lot of those appointments, at least in my mind, seem to be inherently political. And we've seen the Bar Association, in some cases, act in a political manner. So how do you, as far as nominating new judges, like, are there steps that you take to eliminate politics out of that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I have to push back a little bit, I think, on the Bar Association being political. Again, perhaps that's true of the American Bar Association, but I'm not sure it's true of the Wyoming Bar Association. Just want to make that distinction because I think that our Wyoming Bar Association is quite careful about taking any political stances. So, and how they select the members of the JNC is people express an interest and they get voted for by the other members of the bar. So, I think you make a good point in that you don't purge anything of politics completely. There's always some of that is going to leak in, but I think to the extent that it is kept out, We do a pretty good job of it. When it comes to how the Judicial Nominating Commission functions, and then of course I have to say, I don't know how the governor selects his 3 appointments, but the governor is a political person, so yeah, there's probably going to be some politics in there. But who elected the governor? He's representing the people of Wyoming who chose him. In the Judicial Nominating Commission deliberations, in my experience, and I think I did about 30 during my time as chief. There were a lot, and it's a lot of work. But it was one of the best parts of being chief was to be involved in that process. Anyway, that's not answering your question. The Never was there a discussion of a person's political affiliation or even of a person's position, like, how would you come down on this issue? Because that's an impossible question to answer. There are too many different kinds of facts and legal frameworks.
I don't think you probably should answer that question either.
No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't. And so the commission members were always pretty respectful of what their role was. And that was to look for the qualities that I talked about earlier and just find the best qualified people. And so I think in that process of the JNC selection, which I'm pretty familiar with, politics did stay out of it.
Okay. Fair enough. Now, there's been some discussion in some conservative circles about maybe changing up the process by which we select Supreme Court justices. And one of those, and I know you said that our federal judiciary is totally different than how we do things here in Wyoming. I mean, that's kind of fits with, but some of the discussions are, maybe starting some sort of confirmation process. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions about that. First of all, and I asked this question when I talked to Joint Judiciary Committee in one of my last acts, is what is the problem we're solving here for Wyoming? I still don't know what that is because I think we have such an excellent team on the judicial branch. So what are we not doing that we should be doing? I don't know what we're fixing. And I should say, too, the branch is really open to fixing problems that are identified. They just issued their 25 through 27 strategic plan, which is the second one now for the judicial branch. And part of that contains a real commitment to always improving the judiciary, including judicial selection. So if there's a problem identified, I think the branch is willing to address it, but we don't know what that problem is. So my other real issue with, say, Senate confirmation is we see what that's done in federal selection, and it's not pretty. And to me, the idea that a judge is going to make a decision on an important case based on their politics is just wrong. It's just wrong. And if you inject politics in it, either through Senate confirmation or even worse, election, because then you're raising money and there's a whole nother can of worms with that. Then what you want, and what the people of Wyoming want, is for judges to decide their cases, and they're going to be critical to the lives of a lot of people if it's a criminal case, a child custody case, a property dispute, a business dispute. They want the best judge they can have, someone who's smart and objective and got the job through merit, not through political connections. So I don't see a benefit in what's being proposed.
Well, I think you make a good point. I mean, we just recently saw a Supreme Court justice election in, I believe it was Wisconsin, and that thing was a train wreck. I mean, it was, money. I mean, tremendous amounts of money were spent on it, and I agree with you. I don't want that in Wyoming, but I think that, and this is kind of the same discussion surrounding an elected attorney general. If you inject politics into something that you don't want politics in, I mean, there are pluses and minuses with both of those, but I think that an election I really see that as problematic.
It sure is. I mean, you bring up Wisconsin.
Oof.
$100 million were spent on that. And I think most of it came from out of state. And we don't want that in Wyoming for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any thoughts on an elected attorney general? I mean, that was a topic in the last legislative session.
No, I do not.
Fair enough. All right.
Although I will say, I got to give a plug for my former colleague, Keith Couts. He'll do a great job.
Yeah, he certainly came out swinging, didn't he? I mean, it was.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that there have been some other cases where there were, I don't know if you want to call them delays, but it seemed with the appeal he filed that it happened really fast. That he wasn't even messing around. Another topic I wanted to discuss with you, and I think that this is one of those that it affects every state. I think it affects at every level of politics, and that's threats to judges. So,
yeah,
a couple of questions. First, could you just talk about maybe not in specific, but just generally, like some of the threats to Wyoming judges, and just talk about it generally, and then maybe we'll discuss possible solutions to it.
Yeah, well, thanks for raising that, because that is a really big concern, and it's getting worse.
Let's go ahead and take a quick break and get a word in from our sponsors. And when we continue, Justice Fox is going to describe some of the threats that have been made to members of the Wyoming judiciary. But first, an absolutely outrageous profit timeout. Weekend Update is brought to you by U.S. Coin Capital.
Many Americans are growing increasingly concerned about the rapidly growing U.S. government deficits, recognizing the additional printing of paper money devalues U.S. currency. To compensate, American gold and silver coins will provide wealth protection. U.S. Coin Capital provides physical gold and silver coins delivered directly to our clients. You can reach us at 1-800-878-2646, uscoincapital.com.
Are you one of those guys that listen to the president just a little bit too closely and now you're tired of winning? Are you getting the feeling that there's been way too many good things happening in our country and you just can't take it anymore? Well, if you are, and you think you should follow Rosie O'Donnell's example and get the heck out of Dodge, you need to call Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She'll make those foreign country living ideas a reality for you. All you have to do is call 307-699-3519, and she'll make sure some freedom-loving, red-blooded American will now live in the home that you no longer want. If you want to sell your house, or if you want to buy one that's way better than the house you have right now, give Rebecca a call. Again, her phone number is 307-699-3519. Cowboy State Politics is also brought to you by the Buffalo Wool Company. I know, it's 95 degrees almost every single day, and you're probably not thinking about your feet at all. But maybe you should, my friends. Taking care of your feet is just as important when it's blazing hot outside as when it's really, really cold and you can get frostbite. A pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company will keep your feet cool and dry even on the hottest of summer days. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you'll definitely not be disappointed. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the program. That way you can be notified every single time there's a brand new episode of Cowboy State Politics. To do that, go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. And if you'd like to become a sponsor of Cowboy State Politics and do business with a company that aligns with your values, shoot me an email. The address is david@cowboystatepolitics.com. I've got a statewide platform, and nobody is going to beat my advertising rates. One more time, shoot me an email, david@cowboystatepolitics.com, and let's get that conversation started for you. And now, back to my interview with former Chief Justice of the Wyoming Supreme Court, Kate Fox.
Wyoming, we've started in the last few years to keep track of threats to judges. So, and we're asking judges and county security people to let us know when they get them so we can have a better record of it. And they're definitely increasing. So we've had a couple, well, at least one bomb threat that I can think of. That was in Green River. We've had personal threats to judges more than I can tell you. And unfortunately, especially to the female judges, somebody else will have to explain that. But we had a Casper judge, a man who had someone come to his house.
Whoa.
His kids were home and threatened him. We've had in Lander, a criminal defendant called the court and said he was on his way to the court armed and loaded. I mean, there are a lot. And in fact, I mean, if someone wanted to know, we've kept a record of all these things, but there are many, many threats to judges. And as I said, they're increasing. And then we've seen nationally real serious, Judge Salas, I think was her name, in New Jersey. Her son was killed by a guy who came to the door and shot him. We had a speaker come to our judicial conference a couple years ago, a judge from Texas, who was also shot in her driveway. It's bad news, and it's not good. So it's not good for judges, right? You don't like to be threatened, but it's not good for justice either. Because if you have judges afraid of their shadows, it just doesn't work. So, on the Supreme Court, I have to say, we're more insulated. We're not sitting there like a trial court judge is telling you you don't get to have your children.
Right. That's just what I was thinking about.
Yeah. They get a lot more. And it's hard. It's hard on their lives. It's hard on their families.
Hold on. Ken's got a question for you.
Yes, thank you for being here. It's great to see you again.
Good to see you.
What about county prosecutors? I've actually heard from one that has the same concern and feels like maybe they get threatened even more than judges. Any thoughts on that or background?
Yeah, I don't know the data on that. But I do know that it's true. They get a lot of threats, and they should be protected just as much as judges, right? They're just doing their job, and they certainly shouldn't be at risk because of it. We just had a security audit done on some of our courts. So all of our district and circuit courts are in county buildings, and so we've had pretty good working relationships with the counties, but of course some have more money than others.
Right.
Some have older buildings than others. Some of them, like just for example, the old courthouse in Kemmerer, which they're building a new one, but the old one had like 7 entrances.
Ooh.
And these days that doesn't work, right? So just adapting the security, the physical security setup in all these county buildings is a big challenge. And we've also worked pretty hard with our sheriffs because, again, they're the ones who provide, by statute, they provide the security for the courts. And that would probably include the county attorneys because they're probably housed in the same building. In Casper's kind of the gold standard for us. They have really fully staffed there. That courthouse is physically secure and really well protected by sheriff's deputies. But you get into the poorer counties, they can't do that. They don't even have enough sheriff's deputies to staff a courthouse and then also protect their citizens. So, but I would really sympathize with the county prosecutors and sometimes the public defenders too. They're just doing their job. Their clients aren't always happy and they get threats, and none of them should be subject to that kind of risk.
Right. Okay. So I guess the ultimate question for me is, what do we do about it? I mean, we know that there's crazy people out there that want to threaten judges and lawyers and bomb threats. So the question is, what do we do about it? I mean, we have so many judges. I don't know that we could, have a security detail for every single judge across the state. But is there something in your mind that you think we could do to lessen threats or to protect judges? I mean, what's the plan here?
Yeah, there are a couple things. I should say, Justice Fenn is in charge of our Court Security Commission, and he's really the expert on this. But there are some things that can be done. They just about all involve money, of course.
Of course.
We did, luckily, in the last session, we got a little bit of money, not very much, but it's going to be very helpful to keep judges' information scrubbed from the internet, so you can't find their houses, for example. And that's just a small step. And in our smaller communities, it's not much of a step because it's not too hard to follow the judge.
Right, everybody knows.
Yeah, right. But still, it's something. To harden the physical locations, like I talked about. So as I mentioned, the branch just had a security audit done on a bunch of our courthouses. They really focused on the north and east. So I think they did Sheridan. Sheridan's not a good courthouse for security.
There's lots of entrances to that one.
Lots. And Buffalo, of course, has the new building, which is great, but it's not super well staffed, which is understandable in that county. But anyway, it really varies across the state. When we get this security audit, we'll probably, not we, will be asking for money to help. So again, it's county buildings, but not every county has the money. And in the past, the legislature has helped either with matching funds or in some way to have the counties harden up things like entrances and doors. The old Cody courthouse has doors everywhere. And so that's one thing that can be done, is to just help the physical setup. There could be more bodies and like more sheriff's deputies in a lot of, say, the smaller counties that really can't afford to dedicate people to protecting judges and court staff. And I should say, a really important consideration for court security isn't just judges, right? The clerks work really hard, and they're the public face often, and they get a lot of abuse. Those clerks should get medals, all of them. But they're at risk too, and so are jurors, right? We ask people to come to the courts to do their civic duty, and maybe put them at risk. I mean, that's not right.
Yeah, there's been a lot of cases nationwide of jurors being doxxed and their personal information being released. And one thing that I think is particularly troubling is when somebody sits on a jury and then the case is over and then they run to the nearest video camera to talk about it. Well, I don't think that really helps. I don't think it helps the process. And two, it kind of exacerbates the ability of people who would do harm to jurors. I mean, it kind of makes that a little bit worse because there they are right out there in public. I think Ken's got another question for you.
Well, just kind of a comment. Legislators are subject to threats too. I've had many. And sometimes I've gotten some mysterious packages in the mail. So my postman knows exactly who I am, and he watches for me. In fact, he's actually not delivered something, told me about it and said, should I just turn it in? And yeah, we just had it turned directly over to the police. I also have a couple of neighbors. One of them I kind of think of as Gladys Kravitz in my own mind. And they're aware of course, who I am and that these things go on. And they spend a little bit of extra time diligently watching the house. When we're gone to a committee meeting for a weekend or something, they always come over and give me a report. And I think those things are very important for all of us to do. And I know you guys do the same thing. And then, quite frankly, I carry pretty much everywhere I go.
Yeah. I mean, fortunately, we live in Wyoming, and I guess that's a possibility. And one of the things Ken and I talk about a lot is, first, I think that everything is hyper politicized at the national level and even in the state. And this show is all about politics, so I guess to some degree I contribute to it. But one of the things that we talk about is, perhaps if we punished criminals more, that is, handed out more sentences as opposed to maybe probation, maybe that might do something. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do, and there are pros and cons to that. Actually, we did run a bill last year. Do you remember, Ken? Weren't we trying to get higher penalties for judicial officers being threatened? And one of the reasons it didn't succeed is because legislators said, "Well, what about us?"
Yeah.
Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. I was one of the ones that said, "What about us?" and where did it stand?
Well, yeah, and I remember watching that one.
Mm-hmm. So I think there's still merit to the idea. Maybe it needs revamp so that it includes. I think what had been proposed was all judicial officers, so that probably would have included prosecutors. All the attorneys who participate. But I don't disagree. Legislators should also get that kind of protection. So I think maybe enhanced penalties work. Here's the problem, and this is just me talking.
Sure.
I think if somebody's got a screw loose enough to go try to shoot a judge, they're not reading the statute to see, oh, wow, enhanced penalty, right?
Right.
And I'm not sure that's a huge deterrent, but I'm still for it. Can't hurt, might help.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point that we do have we do have a mental health crisis in this state, and there are people that have screws loose, and I think that, we could debate the causes of it, but I think that we are seeing more cases of mental illness, and they are manifesting themselves in smaller communities, at courthouses, in public. So, at least part of it, we've got to do something about that, and I don't know what the answer to that is before we can solve the other problem.
So from my perspective, just a little bit, and it's all coincidental or incidental. I often balk at having more or stricter laws, simply because it's my view that a lot of the laws we already have on the books are not particularly well enforced. And I say that because I have seen people who have been convicted 2, 3, 4 times of drug possession. And next thing you know, they're back out on the street. And it frustrates me. Maybe that's not actually the way that it is, but that's my perception.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not really sure of the facts of that. I understand your frustration. I sure understand the mental health crisis, and I do think it's a crisis. I don't know that incarceration is the answer to it. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's not, because you get this revolving door of locking people up for drug possession or drug use. Dealing, I would say, is a different matter, but use and possession, you lock them up, you don't give them any treatment, because that's not the purpose of jail, incarceration.
Yeah.
And then they get out, and they're the same, or in worse condition than they were when you put them in. And jail is expensive. So I think there are better ways to spend the state's money in the mental health department than just locking them up. I don't know that stiffer sentences are the answer. And again, just on a purely economic basis, because it's so expensive. And if it's not solving the problem, it's just getting them out of the way for a while at a high cost. Yeah, what are we really accomplishing?
Right. Now, I do have one more, and I know we're going long here, but I have one more question for you, and this may fall into the category of kind of outside what we agreed upon, but I thought I might be able to sneak it in. And I had one legislator ask me last night if I could get your thoughts on judicial review, and if you think that it's the job of the judiciary to review acts of the legislature, or to just in general, what do you think of judicial review?
Yeah, I'll answer that.
Okay.
Thanks for the warning.
Well, if you don't want to, that's fine too. But
No, I think, this goes back, and I don't want to do a civics lesson because that's kind of boring, but
Marbury
this is
versus
separation of powers. Yeah, exactly. So it's the legislature's job to enact laws. They do that. And the judiciary is very deferential to that. And you'll see that in a whole bunch of our Supreme Court opinions. Hey, we don't necessarily like this law. We don't necessarily think it's clear, but it's what the legislature did. And unless it's unconstitutional, we're going with it. It's not our job to rewrite legislation, whether we like it or not. But you heard my exception, unless it's unconstitutional, because at some point it is the job of the judiciary to say, oh, yeah, no, you crossed the line here. And I think that's a very important function of the judiciary. And that's called checks and balances. That's what democracy is built on.
no, I tend to agree with you. If a law is blatantly unconstitutional and there's a challenge to it, however that challenge arrives at the court, then I think it is the court's job to say, no, this doesn't comport with the Constitution. 3 strikes and you're out. Well, Kate, thank you very much for taking the time to visit with me. I really appreciate it, and I had a lot of people very excited to hear from you. So thank you for coming on the program.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the invitation. It's been fun talking to you. And Ken, thank you. We've had a good bunch of conversation over the last few years, and I appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome back here anytime.
All right. Well, I'm going on vacation for an indefinite period.
You deserve it. All right.
Thanks a bunch.
Thank you very much. Have a good day. That'll do it for today's installment of the program. Have a good rest of your weekend, and we'll talk again on Monday. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is the one and only Cowboy State Politics.